That moment changed America in the blink of an eye.
Domestic terrorism.
Terrorist plot homegrown would-be terrorists.
9/11 was a watershed moment that reverberated throughout American society. It gave rise to controversial surveillance laws, a restructuring of the FBI, and launched the War on Terror. The threat of domestic terrorism was weighing heavily on everybody's mind, and in this episode we examine the case of the Newburgh Four, accused of trying to bomb Jewish temples and shoot down planes. But just how extreme were they?
A world where freedom itself is under attack, is under attack, is under attack, is under attack.
In the wake of 9/11, the US president at the time, George Bush, was signaling that a serious change within the FBI was needed. Before, the FBI functioned as a law enforcement agency that reacted when crimes were committed. What was now asked of them was to transform from a law enforcement agency to a, quote, national security agency that acted proactively and stopped crimes from happening altogether. The FBI now saw their gloves being taken off, and agents at the time are quoted saying they will do anything to prevent further terrorist attacks. The controversial Patriot Act was signed into law, controversial because it significantly expanded federal surveillance power under the guise of combating terrorism. However, encroachment of people's civil liberties became the norm as a result of it. Their sights were now set on Muslim communities which they now viewed as potential problems. And that brings us to the story of James Cromedy from Newburgh and Shahed Hussein. Cromedy and Hussein end up meeting in front of a mosque in 2008 in the poverty-stricken city of Newburgh. The town had a large Muslim community and was close to New York. They struck up a friendship and Cromedy began sharing facts about his family. He told Hussein that he was born in the US, but his father was from Afghanistan, and that he had visited Afghanistan on 3 separate occasions, most recently in 1995. Hussein also shared that he was born in Pakistan, but now lived in the US. Cromedy was a petty drug dealer and had been to jail for nonviolent offenses. Hussein, on the other hand, was a businessman and would show up in all kinds of different luxury cars. The juxtaposition between the life of poverty James had lived was now contrasting with the glitz and glamour that Shahed was showcasing. He wanted to get closer so that he can also experience it. Because of their shared faith, the two spoke about religion, and Hussein revealed that he was part of a group called JEM, Jaish Mohammed, a designated terrorist organization. Cromedy expressed an interest in joining, and then the topic of jihad came up. Interestingly enough, Hussein had been kicked out of the same mosque the two met in front of because he was asking people there about jihad. Hussein then started poking and prodding about what James would do in the name of Allah. During talks, Cromedy would talk a big game and make anti-Semitic remarks, but would ultimately never pull through. In other words, he would never concoct a plan or procure weapons. After failing to coax him into action by using promises of the afterlife or BMW, Hussein would ultimately offer him $250,000 to carry out a terrorist plot on US soil, saying that his organization was willing to pay a lot of money to get it done. James, down on his luck, after being fired from his job, accepted, but he was now tasked with recruiting more people to join in on the plot. Soon thereafter, Cromedy recruits David Williams, Ante Williams, and Laguerre Payen. The group begin a surveillance operation and drive around staking out Stewart's Air Force Base. A month after the three join, they soon come up with a plot that consists of 2 bag bombs being placed in front of Jewish temples in Riverdale, and to blow up planes at Stewart's Air Force Base using Stinger missiles. Hussein says that he'll procure all the necessary weapons and money. The plan is set in motion, and on the 9th of May, the group travels to Connecticut to get all the equipment and drive back to New York. During the drive to the temples, Cromedy struggles to wire the bombs, and Hussein has to stop and wire them for him. They eventually get to their destination, and Cromedy gets out of the car and places the bombs in front of the temples. He gets back in the car, and all of a sudden, police swarm the group from all sides. At least 100 police officers, SWAT team, bomb specialists, dogs, helicopters, and luckily enough, film crews are all there already. The police have successfully failed a domestic terror plot crafted by homegrown Americans, proving their capabilities to combat domestic terrorism. Or did they?
First at 11 o'clock, we have breaking news. The FBI says it has thwarted a terror plot. 4 men arrested in an undercover FBI sting and charged with a plot to blow up 2 synagogues in the Bronx and shoot down a military plane at a local airport.
Post 9/11, FBI began utilizing sting operations as a primary tool to showcase their capabilities. The controversial operations targeted Muslim individuals in, quote, fake terror plots, providing them with the necessary planning and resources, very often leading to calls for indictments to be dropped because of entrapment. This case was just one example of this. Shahed Hussein was actually an FBI informant that specifically went to the poverty-stricken city of Newburgh precisely because it had a large Muslim community. He was born in Pakistan, that much was true. However, his numerous businesses in the US had failed and he had to file for bankruptcy. Eventually, the FBI caught him falsifying driver's licenses and taking the test for other people, which is a federal crime. With the shadow of jail looming over him, Hussein decided to become an FBI informant. He was described as a very unsavory character and a habitual liar. He would also travel back and forth to Pakistan and was known to associate with suspected terrorists, leaving many to believe he could be playing both sides. All 4 people included in this plot had certain things in common. They were all poor, they did not have jobs, and had all been to jail for nonviolent offenses. James Cromedy had lied about his Afghan heritage. He had never traveled to Afghanistan. He didn't even have a passport. The FBI never bothered to check these facts. David Williams' brother needed a liver transplant, prompting David to seek quick cash. Ante Williams, no relation to David, had worked in a factory all his life and had lived a life of poverty. Laguerre Payen was also no different. However, on top of that, he was also a paranoid schizophrenic. Hussein had videotaped almost everything due to the cameras that were installed in his car and house. However, considering the fact that he was in charge of the cameras and his questionable character, coupled with his bad financial situation, he could have easily turned them on and off whenever he wanted to, thus showing a biased view of what the situation actually was. For instance, the meeting the group had the day before the attack was supposed to take place was not recorded. On top of that, FBI informants get paid when operations are carried out, so no operation equals no money. The $250,000 offered by Hussein has also been widely criticized by many people, some FBI agents even saying that the amount of money by itself is entrapment. Generally, informants are authorized to offer from $5,000 to $10,000 for murder for hire plots. At trial, Hussein argued that the $250,000 was actually code word for $5,000. However, that was never discussed with either the co-conspirators or the FBI. The area the temples were located in, Riverdale, was also an interesting choice. It was an affluent community with a large Jewish population. The FBI knew it would garner significant attention and would paint them in a very positive light, considering it was close to Manhattan where the Twin Towers were blown up. The goal behind these types of sting operations, where the government provides the resources in planning to Muslim individuals, was to showcase the threat in physical form, utilizing the fear caused by it and expanding the budget for the war on terror. The question, however, still stands. Would these 4 individuals have tried to commit what they attempted to without Shahed Hussein pushing them every step of the way? This is where the law of entrapment comes into play. It features 3 rules. Entrapment simply means the luring by a law enforcement agent of a person into committing a crime. So the 3 rules are: the defendant has done it before, the defendant had a plan to do this before, the defendant was very enthusiastic every step of the way and showed no hesitation. In this case, none of these were present. Cromedy was never enthusiastic, backing out multiple times and never trying to plan on his own. It was only after he was enticed with money so large that he saw it as his golden ticket from a life of poverty and crime. The other men are caught on video explicitly saying that they don't want anybody to get hurt and only wanted to act as lookouts. The trial of the 4 men was an interesting one, with the government bringing in a Stinger missile to court and filming a video with identical bombs and mannequins to showcase the destruction it could have done. It was all for show, mainly because the procurement and possession of a Stinger missile is a federal crime with a mandatory minimum sentence of 25 years. In 2011, all 4 were pronounced guilty and sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. But this is not the end. In 2023, the same judge that sentenced the 4 men, Colleen McMahon, was now granting 3 of them compassionate release. David Williams, Ante Williams, and Laguerre Payen were now free after the judge said, quote, "The real lead conspirator was the United States." She continued by saying that the three were, quote, "petty criminals who were easily manipulated but wouldn't have done anything were it not for the US government and their, quote, villainous informant Shahed Hussein." A year later, James Cromedy was also released. The debate around government overreach, however, still rages on to this day, with the question of how much really are you willing to give up in the name of safety?